came in. Whatever it was got Mahoney excited again. He punched an address into his laptop. A few seconds later, we were following the GPS onto the Beltway toward Alexandria, but not to Nicholson's house. Avalon Apartments, Mahoney said. Nicholson came up on a tenant database. Guess he missed a payment or something. A rental, I asked? In the same town where he already lives. Mahoney nodded. Lives with his wife, he said, who I'm betting is at least 15 years older than whoever we find behind door number 2. What do you say? $20? No bet. Chapter 54.
Tony Nicholson leaned forward from the back seat as far as the cuffs would allow. He could see that the lights on the second floor were on.
"We don't need to be here," he said. "She doesn't know anything, I promise you."
The one who had ruined Nicholson's leg opened the passenger door. "Who knows?" he said. "Maybe you talk in your sleep." He got out and went to the front door. Then he used one of Nicholson's keys to let himself in. Nicholson was thinking he still might be able to save himself, and maybe Mara. He had a surreal image of her beautiful face trapped inside a plastic bag. The driver was tall and blonde, like him, with pale eyes and a square forehead. He looked more intelligent than the spick. Maybe he was more reasonable, too.
"Listen," Nicholson said in a whisper. "I do know what you're looking for. I can help you get it, but not without some sort of exit strategy for me."
The man sat straight and still, staring out the windshield as if Nicholson hadn't spoken.
"I'm willing to make a deal, is what I'm saying."
Still nothing from the front seat.
"For the disc of Zeus. Do you hear me? I'll tell you where it is."
"Yeah," the blonde guy finally said. "You will."
"So, why won't you make a deal? Now, here. Why the hell not?"
The driver's fingers drummed lightly on the wheel. "Because we're going to kill you anyway. You and the girlfriend." Nicholson felt a hollow beating in his chest, and he was finally feeling as if nothing mattered anymore. He laughed, a little desperately. "Oh, Jesus, friend, I don't mean to tell you your job, but then why the hell would I—" All at once the driver turned, reached down, and squeezed the soft parts of Nicholson's mangled knee. The pain was instant and stunning. His jaw dropped open even as his throat closed up. Nicholson couldn't breathe, much less scream, and in the strange silence, his tormentor's low voice was easy to hear. "Because at some point, friend, you're going to stop wanting to live and start wanting to die. Understand? And if you haven't told us what we want to know by then, believe me, you will."
Chapter 55.
The car door opened and Mara slid in, thin hips first, with the other man's hand cupping her blonde head of hair. Nicholson saw him tuck a .45 into his waistband before he slammed shut the car door behind her. His girlfriend looked understandably freaked out. Hell, she was only 23 years old. Her arms came together in front with a sweater draped over them to hide the cuffs. He'd given her that sweater as a present. Cashmere, from the polo store in Alexandria. Happier days.
"You okay? Jesus, Tony, what's going on? He told me he was the police, showed me a badge, is he?" "Just don't say anything," Nicholson told her quietly. His injured leg felt as though it were going to explode. It was nearly impossible to focus, and Mara's being here only made matters worse, a whole lot worse, actually. Nicholson loved her. She was the complete opposite of Charlotte. For one thing, she knew too much. For another, she was New York Irish-Italian. Keeping their mouths shut wasn't exactly a strong suit for most New Yorkers. "What do they want?" she pressed. "Where are they taking us? Tony, tell me." "That's a bloody good question," Nicholson said and kicked the back of the seat with his good foot. He shouted at them, "Where the fuck do you think you're taking us?" That got him a backhand across the cheekbone with a .45. He felt the pain, but it was getting hard to care. In fact, pain could be considered a good thing. It meant he was still alive, didn't it? "Whatever this is, I don't work for him anymore," Mara was already telling the two men in front. "You have to believe me. I'll tell you anything you want to know. I was the bookkeeper." "Shut up, Mara," Nicholson said. "Won't do any good anyway." He's been shaking people down, important people, for money, taping them, and he leaned into her, which was about all he could do. Maura, I'm warning you. Or what, Tony? It's a little late for warnings, isn't it? I shouldn't even be here. Her dark brown eyes flashed fear and anger, the same things he was feeling, so it was hard to completely blame her. I'm talking about big names, she rattled on. Rich guys, politicians, Wall Street, lawyers, that kind of thing. Yeah, the driver cut her off. Tell us something we don't already know. Otherwise, like the man said, shut up, Mara.
Chapter 56. Mahoney called in our new position as we followed the GPS off the Beltway and onto Eisenhower Avenue. It was getting dark, but the roads were still crowded with commuters. I wondered vaguely when 9 to 5 had become an anachronism. A mile and a half up Eisenhower, we came to a row of identical 4-story townhouses fronting the street. A break in the road marked the entrance, with a sign welcoming visitors to Avalon at Cameron Court. The GPS led us through the mini maze of the compound inside. It was one of those upscale developments, communities with their own everything. Rents here were as high as $3,500 a month, according to Mahoney and his laptop. You know, my aunt lives in a place like this down in Vero Beach, Florida. They have a 2-pet maximum, but she's got 4 identical little dogs. Just walks them 2 at a time. I sort of listened until we came onto Nicholson's block. Hey, Ned, see that? A dark blue sedan was just pulling out of a driveway about 50 yards ahead. Is that Nicholson's building? Mahoney sat up and closed the laptop. Could be. Let's find out. The other car started up the block, heading right toward us. It had DC plates, 2 men in front, 2 passengers in back who were harder to see. As we passed, I looked in, and for just a second, I locked eyes with Tony Nicholson. Chapter 57. As soon as my siren came on, the dark blue sedan took off up the block and then spun around the corner. I had no idea who these guys were, mob, guns for hire, or what, but the way they tore out of there told me Nicholson and his girlfriend were in some serious trouble. Ned was already on the phone. This is Mahoney. I have command of the target, Nicholson. We're in pursuit of a blue Pontiac G6, DC plates. We came around another corner, and I saw them stopped at the compound's exit. One for the good guys, Ned said, and pumped a fist. There was a solid stream of traffic on Eisenhower blocking them in, and for maybe a second, I thought we might get through this cleanly. Then the Pontiac's doors opened on both sides, and 2 men came out firing. A bullet pierced my windshield with a dull popping sound before Ned or I could get out. I threw open my door and rolled onto the street. Mahoney also got out the driver's side and stayed low. From where I was, in a gully, I could only see the sedan's driver. He looked military to me, tall with a blonde buzz cut, and still firing. I didn't shoot back, didn't dare. The problem was the traffic stopped behind him. There wasn't a safe shot I could take. He seemed to figure that out and broke for the nearest building. As he passed the large Avalon sign fronting the complex, I fired off a fast, controlled double tap. 2 shells kicked over my shoulder. The blonde man went down with the second one. But we weren't out of this yet, not by a long shot. Mahoney was up for firing. I could see the other man now down in the street. He had a wet hole in the leg of his pants, but he got up again. "Drop your weapon," Mahoney shouted as the man began to hobble away. I came around to cover from a second angle, just as the guy raised a .45 at Mahoney. Both our shots got off before his. He spasmed twice when they hit, and still managed to pull the trigger one more time. His shot nearly clipped Ned, who dropped and fired back. The last bullet caught the guy in the shoulder. The shooter was alive when we got to him, wide-eyed and tremoring, his finger still on the trigger. Ned stepped on his wrist and pulled the .45 out of his hand. "Hang in there," I told him. "Ambulance is on its way." He was in bad shape, though. A wound in his stomach was pumping blood. too much and too fast. While Mahoney ran to Nicholson and the woman, I pulled off my jacket and pressed it to the wound. "Who do you work for?" I asked. I wasn't sure if he could hear me. He didn't look scared, but his eyes were like saucers. When he tried to swallow, foamy blood came through his lips. My jacket was already soaked. "Tell me," I finally shouted at him, "who sent you here?" The gunman's breath hitched and his grip went tight on my arm, just before everything went lax. He died without saying a word that might help us understand, well, anything about what was happening. Chapter 58. Our 2 dead soon became 3 when Charlotte Nicholson, her face blue, the body still warm, turned up in the Pontiac's trunk. Tony Nicholson and his presumed girlfriend, Mara Kelly, were both mute, except to say that they hadn't done anything wrong and that they had no idea who the dead men were. That's as much as we got before the FBI took them into custody. By now, the response team had swelled to 3 bureau cars, Alexandria Police, EMTs, and the local sheriff's department. As soon as I could, I called Bree to check in. That's when I realized that my phone had been off for hours, ever since the sweep at the private club out in Culpeper. When I turned it on, there were 3 voicemails waiting, all from Bree. Right away, I got nervous. I listened to the first message. "Hey, it's me. Listen, the doctors are concerned about Nana's kidney function. They say her fluid levels aren't what they should be. There's no prognosis yet, but you should give me a call. Love you." I turned toward my car now and started walking, not at all sure I wanted to hear the second message. "Alex, it's Bree. I tried the bureau, but nobody seems to know where you are. I don't have Ned's cell. I'm not sure what else to do. Nana isn't good. I hope you get this soon." I was running, but the third message nearly stopped me cold on the spot. "Alex, where are you? I hate to leave this on your phone, but Nana's gone into a coma. I'm going back in now, so you won't be able to reach me anymore. Get here as soon as you can." Chapter 59.
The function being held at one observatory circle tonight was relatively informal, a Maryland crab boil for several mid-level staffers and their families. That meant jackets with no ties, until the vice president went to shirt sleeves just before dinner and his male guests followed suit. Agent Cormorant, however, kept his jacket on. It was specially tailored to conceal a .357 Sig Sauer pistol holstered under his right arm, and though the event was distinctly low threat, it was not in Cormorant's professional DNA to take anything for granted, especially not these days. Secret Service had been covering the sprawling Victorian residence since 1972. The Rockefellers had never moved in, but the Mondales, Bushes, Quayles, Gores, and Cheneys had all lived here before the Tillmans. Every corner of the place was well documented, literally. Cormorant knew the house better than his own 2-bedroom condo on M. So when he needed a private word with the vice president, it was second nature to access the library through a back sitting room to avoid being seen coming or going by any of the guests. Tillman poured himself a Scotch rocks and waited by the mantel, while Cormorant closed and latched doors at both ends of the room. "What is it that can't wait, Dan?" Tillman asked. "I should tell you right now, sir, that I'm about to step way out of line here," Cormorant said. Tillman sipped his drink. "That's something new. The warning, I mean." The 2 men were friends as much as men in their positions could be. Someday they'd share fishing trips and holidays, but for now, it was Mr. Vice President and Agent Cormorant, protectee and protector. "Sir, I think it's time you brought the president in on Zeus, specifically the fact that someone connected to the White House or the cabinet might be a killer." Tillman's expression hardened instantly, and he set his drink down. "The president knows that much. I took care of it. We still need facts. We need a name." Tillman had already been briefed about the FBI raid in Virginia, but not on the latest developments. Cormorant quickly brought him up to speed, including the cameras found at the sex club. No one's talking specifically about Zeus yet, but if any recordings happen